Hello everyone, good morning. Today is June 5, 2025. This is the latest financial news at Finance Today MX. With our top story today, Mexico prepares response if the U.S. maintains tariffs on steel and aluminum, warns Sheinbaum. Today's stories. Mexico prepares a response if the U.S. maintains tariffs on steel and aluminum, warns Sheinbaum. The Mexican government will not remain inactive if the 50% tariffs that the Donald J. Trump administration imposed on steel and aluminum entering the United States starting June 4 are maintained, and is therefore already analyzing its response to this new trade policy. Car sales in Mexico post 2 consecutive declines in May. Vehicle sales in Mexico fell again in May, affected by a weak economic environment and slower consumer growth, despite continued declines in interest rates. ADP private employment in the U.S. saw its weakest growth in 2 years in May. The U.S. private labor market recorded its slowest hiring pace in 2 years in May, exposing signs of weakening economic activity at a time when trade tensions between the country and other nations are flaring. Six Flags Mexico expects to reach pre-pandemic visitor levels this year. Six Flags expects to reach the visitor levels it had before the COVID-19 pandemic impacted its operations this year, leveraging customer experience. Business. Pemex expects to save $250 million over 2 years with layoffs and other efficiencies. State-owned Petróleos Mexicanos, the world's most indebted oil company, launched a plan to save 4.8 billion pesos, $250 million, over 2 years through a strategy that involves reducing administrative costs, which will lead to a cut in senior administrative positions. Janama Lab raises 1.2 billion pesos with 6- and 7-year bonds on the Mexican Stock Exchange. Janama Lab, a Mexican manufacturer and distributor of pharmaceutical and personal care products, announced it raised 1.2 billion pesos, $62.6 million, with the placement of 2 bonds on the Mexican stock market, with terms of 6 and 7 years. Amazon to invest $10 billion in AI infrastructure in the U.S. Amazon.com, the e-commerce and cloud computing services company, plans to invest $10 billion to expand its artificial intelligence infrastructure in North Carolina, United States. Heineken Mexico appoints Bonacloca as CEO, succeeding Duverdier. Heineken Mexico, one of the country's leading beer producers, announced the appointment of Oriol Bonacloca as its new CEO, effective July 1 of this year, replacing Guillaume Duverdier. Flow, a Chilean paytech company, announces its arrival in the Mexican market. Flow, a Chilean company focused on payment solutions for companies of various sizes, announced its arrival in the Mexican market as an alternative for digital payments.
Cassandra raises 43 million pesos in seed round to operate in Mexico. Cassandra.app, an artificial intelligence-based technology platform from Italy, raised 43 million pesos, $2.2 million, in a seed investment round that will serve, among other things, to launch operations in Mexico. MAC Hospitals adds new unit in Lomas Verdes. MAC Hospitals announced that it will add a new unit following the name change of the current Rio de la Loza Hospital. Economy. Trump sees Chinese President Xi Jinping as tough, difficult to reach agreements with. U.S. President Donald Trump said that Xi Jinping, the president of China, is a tough person and difficult to reach agreements with, a statement that comes as the two nations are working to end their tariff war. Economic activity in the U.S. falls amid pessimism over tariffs, says Beige Book. Economic activity in the United States suffered a slight contraction between late April and early June due to the high level of uncertainty experienced by businesses in the current environment, according to the Federal Reserve's Beige Book report. Fixed investment in Mexico remains on the rise in March with construction growth. Gross fixed investment in Mexico grew 0.3% seasonally adjusted monthly in March, which represented its second consecutive increase, reported the National Institute of Statistics and Geography. Private consumption in Mexico falls 0.2% in March and rises 1.2% annually. Private consumption in Mexico's domestic market contracted 0.2% seasonally adjusted monthly in March, its third decline in the last 4 months, according to data from the National Institute of Statistics and Geography. Canada maintains rates at 2.75% to address risks from uncertainty. The Bank of Canada decided, as other central banks in developed nations have previously done, to keep the country's benchmark rate unchanged at 2.75%, given the uncertainty surrounding the future of the country's trade relationship with the United States, its neighbor and main trading partner. Markets. Mexican equities extend losses due to weakness in U.S. indicators. Mexican stocks maintained their negative trend this Wednesday, in an environment where U.S. markets operated with a mixed bias. Investor sentiment was affected by the weakness in timely service sector indicators for May, as well as by a slower pace of private job creation during the same period. Given this data, fixed income markets adjusted their expectations, pricing in 2 cuts in the Federal Reserve's benchmark rate before the end of the year. Stock indices closed mixed in the U.S. as the economic contraction is assessed. U.S. benchmark stock indices closed mixed on Wednesday as investors assessed a Federal Reserve report showing an economic contraction. The peso closed near its strongest level since October. The Mexican peso briefly reached its strongest level so far this year, amid protectionist policies in the United States that are reportedly eroding the labor market. Thanks for listening. If you find useful this information, please hit the subscribe button to get the latest news. As well as share, comment, and like, so we can expand our community of subscribers. Sincerely, thank you, have a good one.